Welcome back to the deep dive. Um, Today we are wading into waters that are usually reserved for horror movies or, I don't know, theology class maybe?
Yeah, theology for sure.
Right. We are looking at a huge stack of sources today that all center around one single, very heavy word, which is evil.
It is a heavy one. And, usually when we say evil, the brain goes straight to the supernatural.
Exact.
Demons, monsters, uh, the guy in the hockey mask chasing teenagers through the woods.
Right. But the sources we have today, and I gotta say, is a wild, very eclectic mix. They are asking us to flip that definition completely upside down.
Totally.
They're arguing that evil isn't a monster under the bed. It's actually a measurable social pathology.
Measurable and systemic.
Systemic, yes.
It's so boring.
And the scariest part of all this, it is something we might actually be participating in without even knowing it.
It's a deeply disturbing thought, but that is the absolute through line in this research. We're synthesizing some heavy-hitting classics today with some very modern, almost esoteric papers.
It's a really interesting stack.
It is. We have Hannah Arendt's political theory on the banality of evil. We have structural sociology from folks like Foucault and Marx. And then we have these recent papers discussing a pandemic of evil and concepts like frequency literacy.
It honestly sounds like a collision between a university philosophy department and a frantic late-night internet rabbit hole.
That is a surprisingly accurate way to put it.
So our mission today is to make sense of that collision. We're trying to answer two massive questions. How do regular, seemingly nice people become complicit in predatory systems? And more importantly, if the system is infected, how does an individual reclaim their sovereignty to stop it?
Before we really get into the gears of this, we do need a quick disclaimer.
Yes, very important.
These sources discuss heavy themes. We're talking systemic corruption, predatory abuse, and there are references to the Epstein files and the whole web of darkness.
Right.
So our job here is to be the impartial observers. We are reporting strictly on the arguments and the frameworks presented in the text. We aren't taking sides left or right. We are just unpacking the stack.
We are just the messengers here. So let's start with the foundation, which is Hannah Arendt. She coined the phrase banality of evil back in the early 60s.
She did.
And most people know that phrase, but I feel like we usually use it wrong. We use it to mean, oh, evil happens every day. But she meant something much more specific, didn't she?
She really did. She was reporting on the trial of Adolf Eichmann, who was a top Nazi official. And you have to understand the context of the time. The world wanted a monster.
Of course they did.
They wanted a fanatic, a sadist, someone literally foaming at the mouth. But when Arendt looked at him, she didn't see a supervillain at all. She saw a bureaucrat. She famously described him as terrifyingly normal.
That's the part that always gets me. He wasn't plotting world domination in a dark tower. He was sitting at a desk worried about his pension and his next promotion.
Precisely. Arndt's argument, and honestly this is controversial to this day, was that his evil didn't come from some deep desire to be wicked. It came from a pure inability to think critically. He was what she called a joiner. He wanted to belong to the system. He followed the law of the land, even when the moral order had been completely inverted.
So because mass murder was literally the law, he just filed the paperwork.
He filed the paperwork, he outsourced his conscience to the state, he stopped being a moral agent and just became a function of the system.
Okay, so that is the banality part. Now let's bridge this to the newer material in our stack. We have this source material on the pandemic of evil.
Right, the pandemic framework.
Yeah, it takes Arendt's idea of the unthinking individual and it scales it up to the modern day. It describes evil not as an isolated event, but as a contagious human energy or a frequency.
This is where the language shifts a bit, but the underlying mechanic is exactly the same. The source introduces the term Epstein energy.
Which is a heavy term.
It is. Now, to be clear, the text emphasizes this isn't just about one specific man. It uses Epstein as an archetype.
Yeah.
It's a label for a specific parasitic frequency used by a transnational elite.
The Epstein class, they call it.
Right. And the argument is that this class operates with functional immunity. But here's the key connection back to Arendt. This isn't just a few bad apples doing bad things in a dark room somewhere.
It's bigger than that.
Much bigger. It is a systemic pathology. The source argues that our major institutions, so banks, universities, government agencies, they provide the enabling architecture for this exploitation.
So if Arendt says evil is banal because people just follow orders, this new source says evil is pandemic because our institutions are actually designed to protect the predators.
That is the synthesis, yes. It suggests that the institutions we explicitly trust are often asymptomatic carriers of this corruption.
Asymptomatic carriers.
Yeah. They normalize the extraction of value and even human life from the vulnerable to the powerful. They are the infrastructure that allows this predatory energy to just operate in plain sight.
That is a terrifying image, because we think of a bank or prestigious university as these neutral pillar of society things.
Right.
But this theory suggests they're more like the wiring system for a predatory machine.
And that wiring relies on people like Eichmann, or honestly people like us, to keep the current flowing without asking any questions.
Okay, let's pause and really look at that people like us part, because I think most listeners, and honestly me included, we sit here and think, well, I'm not a predator.
Natural.
I'm not a Nazi bureaucrat. I'm a good person. I pay my taxes. I walk my dog. I don't do evil things. But the sources suggest there is a mechanism, a specific trap, that gets ordinary people hooked into these systems.
This is the most uncomfortable part of the research, I think, because it holds up a mirror to the reader. It asks, how does the system recruit you? And the sources introduce this concept of shadow triggers.
Shadow triggers. It sounds a bit dramatic, like a spy novel term or something.
Yeah.
What does it actually mean in practice?
It refers to the biological and psychological vulnerabilities that predatory systems exploit to get you to comply. The source lists 3 big ones.
Okay, let's go through them.
The first is the need for status.
Ah, the dopamine hit. Being in the VIP room. Being near the power.
Exactly. The high of being in the know or getting invited to the right conference. The second is the fear of lack. This is the primal threat that if you don't play along, you will lose your resources.
You'll lose your job, your health insurance, your stability.
Yes. And the third is the desire for belonging, which is that terrifying, ancient human fear of being an outsider, of being cast out of the tribe entirely.
So let's ground this for you listening. This isn't necessarily about someone in a dark alley asking you to commit a major crime.
Not at all.
It could be, you're at work, you see a financial report that looks fudged.
Yeah.
Or you see a colleague get treated really unfairly by a high-performing manager.
Happens all the time.
And in that moment, your shadow trigger kicks in. You think, well, if I say something, I might not get that promotion, which is status. Or if I rock the boat, they might fire me, which is fear of lack.
Right.
Or even just everyone else is smiling and nodding in the meeting. I don't want to be the difficult one. I want to belong.
That is the exact mechanism. The source calls it a biological bypass.
A biological bypass.
Yes. The system basically hacks your nervous system. Your body's raw drive for safety and status overrides the immune system of the soul, which is your moral judgment.
So your biology betrays your morality.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
physically feel safer by complying, even if your spirit is screaming that it's wrong.
Man, that explains so much. It explains how institutional silence happens on such a massive scale.
And that silence leads directly to moral disengagement. You convince yourself that ethical standards just don't apply to you in this specific context because, well, that's just how the industry works.
Or I have a mortgage to pay.
Right. That is the banality of the infection. It is not malice. It is a survival mechanism gone completely wrong.
So we have a system that hacks our biology to keep us quiet. But the stack also dives into the actual structure of society.
Yeah.
How does the system hide the actual evil? You mentioned Foucault and Elias earlier.
I did.
How do they fit into this Epstein energy concept? Let's start with Foucault.
Well, Michel Foucault is essential here. In his book Discipline and Punish, he describes the shift from the old days where punishment was public torture in the town square to the modern era of the panopticon.
The panopticon, just to remind you, that's the prison design, where the guard tower's in the center, and they can see everyone, but the prisoners can't see the guard, right?
Yes, exactly. But Foucault argues our whole society has become a panopticon. The goal isn't just to punish crime anymore. It is to normalize people, to mold them. He calls it the carceral continuum.
Carceral meaning prison-like.
Yes. He argues that schools, factories, hospitals, and welfare agencies all use the exact same disciplinary techniques as prisons do.
Like what?
Surveillance, ranking, correcting behavior, keeping permanent records.
So my HR department, using performance metrics and monitoring my Slack channels, Foucault would say that's the same mechanism as a prison warden.
Foucault would say absolutely. Yes, it is the same mechanics to control. They mold us to be docile bodies that fit neatly into the economic machine.
Docile body.
Right. And when you are trained from kindergarten to be a docile body, you are prime real estate for a predatory system. You are trained not to question authority.
We're built to be bricks in the wall. But what about the hiding part? If there is this pandemic of evil, this systemic predation, why don't we see it more often? Why isn't it obvious?
That is where the sociologist Norbert Elias comes in. He talks about the civilizing process. His argument is that as society became civilized, we didn't actually get rid of violence or madness or death.
What do we do with it?
We just moved it behind the scenes.
We privatized it.
Exactly. We put the sick in hospitals, we put the dying in nursing homes, the criminals in prisons, the slaughterhouses outside of town. We created a smooth, polite surface of daily life.
And this connects to the modern source on the Epstein class.
Perfectly. Because predatory behavior thrives behind that civilized veneer. The source argues that high-level predators use philanthropy, gala dinners, art foundations, and high culture status as a literal shield.
It's camouflage. People think, he can't be a monster, he just donated $1 million to the public library.
Correct. It relies heavily on the public's blind spots. Elias would say, we have delicate sensibilities now. We actually want to believe the beautiful lie because looking at the ugly truth is too visceral.
It's too disgusting for us.
Right. We become accomplices because we actively refuse to look behind the curtain.
Okay, so let's summarize where we are. We have a system that hacks our biology through shadow triggers, trains us to be docile bodies from childhood, and hides the violence behind a velvet curtain of elite philanthropy. It is a perfect trap.
It really is.
But then the curtain rips.
It always does eventually.
We get a massive data dump. The Epstein files get released. A major financial scandal breaks. The truth spills out into the public square. The sources talk about what happens next, and they call it cultural lag.
Cultural lag is such a great term for this. It is when the technology or the information moves much faster than our moral capacity to process it.
So the truth is revealed, the pandemic is exposed, but you just go into shock.
Yes. We don't know what to do with the information. It's the gap between knowing the terrifying truth and actually changing how we live our lives.
And the sources identify 3 types of casualties that fall into this gap. 3 ways people basically fail to cope with the revelation.
Let's walk through them. First, you have the cynic.
The cynic.
This person looks at the files, sees the depth of the corruption, and just breaks. They decide everything is fake, everything is rigged, and they lose faith in humanity entirely.
They just want to burn it all down.
Or they just say, why bother doing anything good? They become a carrier of nihilism.
Okay, that's one. Who is next?
The complacent. This is the person who sees the truth clearly but decides the cost of changing their life is just too high.
The shadow triggers again.
Exactly. They choose comfort. They stay in the infected system. They keep their job at the corrupt bank. They keep quiet at the dinner party.
They sacrifice their sovereignty for safety.
Precisely. And the third casualty is the polarized.
This one feels very relevant right now.
Very. This is the person who uses the crisis to fuel tribal hatred. They don't actually want to fix the systemic evil. They just want to use the scandal as a weapon to attack their political enemies.
They say, look what your side did, ignore what my side did.
Right. Which is a total distraction. Because the source argues this is a class and frequency issue, not a partisan political issue.
And this polarized reaction leads directly to what sociologists call moral panic. The sources mention Stanley Cohen here. Moral panic is when the media completely freaks out, right?
It is a predictable cycle. You have threat identification, then massive media amplification, public outrage, and finally a demand for an official crackdown.
But the source argues this cycle is actually a trap. Why is it a trap? People are angry, they want justice. Isn't a crackdown good?
Because moral panics almost always reinforce the existing power structures. We demand the government do something. So the quarantine officers, meaning the elites and the legal systems, get more power.
But wait. If those officers are, as the source suggests, asymptomatic carriers of the corruption...
You're asking the fox to install a better lock on the henhouse.
Wow. Yes. Relying on external institutions to fix a systemic pathology is what the text calls a sovereignty bypass. You were looking for a savior in the exact same system that built the trap.
Which brings us to the solutions section of Stack.
And honestly, this is where the language gets a little weird, a little woo-woo, if I can be completely honest.
It definitely gets esoteric here.
They start talking about frequency literacy and firewalls. It sounds like I need to go buy some crystals and burn sage. Help me ground this. What are they actually talking about practically?
Think of frequency literacy as social physics, or just high-level pattern recognition. It is the democratization of discernment.
Okay, break that down for me.
Instead of waiting for a news anchor or a credentialed expert to tell you who is safe or what is true, You learn to read the energetic reality of your interactions yourself.
So it's basically listening to your gut.
Yes, but a highly trained gut. It is about recognizing the vibe of predation. Does this person or this organization drain you? Is there a massive disconnect between their PR words and their actual energy?
Rebuilding the immune system of the soul, like we talked about earlier.
Exactly. It's reclaiming your own judgment. And to protect that judgment, the text says we absolutely need to build firewalls.
3 of them.
Right.
And this is the practical checklist for you listening. The first is the psychological firewall. The text calls it the refusal of the hook.
This goes right back to the shadow triggers. You have to rigorously identify your own vulnerabilities. Do you crave status? Are you terrified of not belonging?
And how do you fix that?
The text says you need to build a high-density ego.
High-density ego. Now, usually having a big ego is considered a bad thing.
True. But in this specific context, it means having a sense of self that is so solid, so incredibly dense, that it does not need external validation.
So you don't need the corrupt boss to pat you on the head to feel like you have value.
Right. If your ego is high density, their hook cannot snag you. You are self-contained.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
You cannot be bribed with status if you already validate yourself. What is the second firewall?
The sociological firewall. This is termed selective proximity and dynamic disconnection.
Which is an academic way of saying what?
Breaking up with bad friends, quitting toxic jobs.
That is so much harder than it sounds.
It is incredibly hard. The source says you must be willing to walk away from infected networks, even if it costs you real money or social capital. You cannot heal while you are still inhabiting the frequency of the sickness.
And that hits the fear of lack trigger. Again, you have to be willing to lose something to stay clean.
You do. But instead of relying on big institutions, the source suggests we build sovereign nodes.
Sovereign node.
Small pockets of interaction based on absolute accountability and high frequency.
Like starting a small business with trusted friends,
Mm.
or a tight-knit community group.
Exactly. Small cells of health. You don't try to fix the whole corrupt organ at once. You create a small node of healthy tissue and you let it grow organically.
Beautiful. And the third, firewall.
The spiritual firewall. The source calls this the sovereign no.
The sovereign no. That sounds powerful.
It is the absolute law of non-participation. It is a total withdrawal of your energy, your attention, and your resources from predatory systems.
You stop feeding the beast entirely.
You don't fight it on its own terms because that just feeds it more energy. You starve it.
Which leads directly to the sovereign rule mentioned in the conclusion of the text.
Yeah.
And I have to say, this is a really tough pill to swallow for anyone who wants to be a hero.
It is the hardest part. The rule states you cannot save someone from a frequency they are choosing to inhabit.
Oof, that cuts so deep.
Yeah.
Because when you see the truth, you want to wake everyone else up. You want to shake your friends and say, look at the corruption. Look at the data files.
But if they are stuck in the lag, if they have chosen to be the cynic or the complacent, you cannot force them out of it.
So what do?
The source says you can only model the higher frequency yourself. You provide the map by living it out loud, but you cannot carry them across the finish line.
Wow. And the final concept here, which is honestly my favorite part of the entire stack, the mechanism of victory, the ghost concept.
The ghost concept is absolutely fascinating. The idea is that evil, this Epstein energy, the systemic pathology, is inherently parasitic.
It can't create anything on its own.
Exactly. It needs a grid to run on. It needs human participants. It needs silent accomplices who file the paperwork. It needs us to look the other way so it can operate.
It needs a host. Literally like a virus.
Just like a virus. So if enough people disconnect, if enough individuals build those 3 firewalls and deplatform the frequency within their own daily lives, the evil has nowhere to land.
It becomes a ghost signal.
Yes, it is still broadcasting, but there are no receivers left to pick it up. It doesn't disappear with a massive bang or a violent revolution.
It just starves.
It fades into static.
That is such a profound shift in perspective. We usually think fighting evil means marching in the streets or, voting for the other guy in the election.
Right.
But this suggests the ultimate rebellion is just refusing to play the game at all.
Rendering the system obsolete by refusing to be a host for it, it takes all the power away from the vague they, the elites, the massive corporations, and puts it squarely back on us.
On the individual, mundane choices we make every single day.
It suggests that sovereignty isn't a piece of paper. It isn't something you get from the Constitution. It is an energetic stance.
It is a daily discipline.
A rigorous daily discipline.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we are left with a final thought for you. And it is not the usual, how do we fix the whole world question.
No, it's much more personal than that. The question from these sources is, where are you still plugged in simply because it is comfortable?
Where are you accepting the hook of status or the illusion of safety?
And are you finally ready to say the sovereign no, even if you have to stand there and say it alone?
That is the real question, something heavy to mull over on your commute today. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Always a pleasure to unpack these with you.
We will catch you on the next one. Stay sovereign.